My name is Robert Thompson. I'm 64 years old and I'm retired. I live here in Manchester in a house I purchased with tremendous effort after my divorce 16 years ago. I have two children, Michael, who has been living in Germany for 9 years, and David, who lives here in Manchester with his wife Sarah and my two grandchildren, Emma, who is 7 years old, and Oliver, who is 5. Throughout my entire life, I've always dreamed of visiting Europe. When Michael called me at the beginning of March, telling me that he and his German wife Katrin had welcomed a baby, my heart raced with excitement. "Dad," he said with that warm voice I hadn't heard in person for 9 years, "how about you come meet little James? He looks exactly like me when I was a baby." I didn't think twice. I used part of my savings, retrieved my passport that had been stored in a drawer for years, and bought the ticket. It would be my first international trip, 15 days in Germany, meeting my grandson and reuniting with my eldest son. David was thrilled for me. "Go ahead, Dad. You deserve this. Everything will be under control here." The journey was a dream come true. Michael's house in Berlin was cozy. Katrin treated me like royalty. And little James, oh my goodness, what a beautiful baby. I spent entire days holding him, helping with care, cooking for the new parents. Michael took me to see the tourist attractions. We took hundreds of photos. I felt complete, fulfilled. But on the 12th day of the trip, while I was feeding James, my phone rang. It was a call from England. When I saw it was David, I found it strange because he knew I wouldn't return for 3 more days. "Hello, son, everything all right?" His voice was shaky, nervous. "Dad, sorry to call like this, but I need you here urgently." My heart sank immediately. "What happened, David? Did someone get hurt?" "No, Dad, it's not that. Our rental contract expired last week and the landlord doesn't want to renew. He said he's going to sell the apartment. We have to move out by Friday, or he'll file for eviction." I froze. "What do you mean, son? You didn't tell me anything." "We tried to handle it ourselves, Dad. The bank denied the financing we applied for, and all the apartments for rent are extremely expensive. Sarah is 7 months pregnant with our 3rd child. She can't be stressed, and her parents came here for Emma's birthday party next week." I felt my world collapse. There I was, on the other side of the world, living a dream while my son was going through such a situation. "Son, do you have somewhere to stay temporarily?" "Dad, we were thinking, would it be possible to stay at your house for a few days, just until we get organized and find a place?" "Just 2 weeks, maximum a month." "You don't even need to come back now. We can get the key from the neighbor." My father's heart spoke louder. How could I leave my son, my pregnant daughter-in-law, and my grandchildren homeless? "David, of course you can stay at home, but I will return. Family is family. You need me now." Michael, who was listening to the conversation, tried to convince me to stay. "Dad, you just arrived. You were having so much fun. Let them figure it out." But I had already made my decision. Son David and his family are also my responsibility. I can't stay here knowing they're going through this. I'm returning tomorrow. That same night I changed my return ticket. It cost a fortune, but I couldn't leave my son helpless. I packed with a broken heart. I said goodbye to my grandson, knowing I didn't know when I would see him again, and boarded back to England the next day. During the entire return flight, I kept thinking about what it would be like to have a full house again. It had been years since I lived alone. Had my routine, my tranquility, but family is family, and I would do anything for my son and grandchildren. I just didn't imagine what awaited me when I got home. I arrived at Manchester Airport on a Tuesday morning. Exhausted after more than 20 hours of travel, took a taxi straight home, anxious to hug my grandchildren and see how the situation was. During the journey, I kept imagining how I would organize everyone in my 3-bedroom house. It would be tight, but I'd manage. When the taxi stopped in front of my house, the first thing that caught my attention was the number of cars parked. There was David's car, one I didn't recognize, and an old pickup truck with out-of-town plates. Strange, I thought. How many people came to help with the move? I paid the taxi, grabbed my suitcase, and headed for the front gate. When I put the key in the lock, it wouldn't turn. I tried again, forcing it a bit, but nothing. How odd, I murmured. Could the lock be jammed? I tried once more, but the key simply wouldn't go in properly. That's when the gate opened from inside. It was Sarah, my daughter-in-law, with her huge, pregnant belly, but with an expression on her face I had never seen before. It wasn't the face of someone relieved to see the father-in-law arrive to help. It was almost irritation. "Mr. Thompson, you arrived earlier than expected," she said, forcing a smile. "How was the trip?" "Hello, dear. The trip was good, but I came rushing because of your situation. Why didn't my key open the door?" Sarah gave a nervous little laugh. "Oh, we changed the lock. It was for security, you know. With so many people coming and going to help with the move, we got worried. My father suggested changing it." "Your father, is he here?" "Yes. He and my mother came for Emma's birthday party, which is next week." Actually, I had forgotten with all the rush of returning. I entered the house and almost didn't recognize my own living room. There were boxes stacked everywhere, clothes scattered on the sofa, children's toys on the floor. The smell was different too, a mixture of strong perfume and seasoned food I wasn't used to. "Grandpa!" The joyful shouts of Emma and Oliver made me momentarily forget the strangeness. They ran to hug me and I felt my heart warm. At least my grandchildren were well. "Where is your dad?" I asked, crouching down to be at the children's level. "Daddy went to work early. He said you were coming and that we had to help Grandpa get used to the new house," said Emma. And that phrase intrigued me. New house. That's when a man of about 50-something appeared, graying hair, dress shirt, with a very confident manner. "You must be Robert. I'm Edward, Sarah's father. Pleasure to finally meet you in person." I shook his hand, still confused. "Pleasure, Edward. Thank you for helping with the move." "Don't mention it, we're family. By the way, let me introduce my wife," he called out loudly. "Margaret, come meet Robert." A woman my age appeared, well-dressed, with dyed hair and manicured nails. She greeted me politely, but I noticed she was evaluating me from head to toe, as if measuring the competition. "Good that you arrived," said Margaret. "We were organizing everything here. I hope you don't mind, but we kind of reorganized some things to accommodate everyone better." "What do you mean reorganized?" Sarah intervened quickly. "Since we didn't know when you were coming back and my parents needed a place to sleep, we organized the rooms in a more practical way." I felt a chill in my stomach. "What kind of organization?" "Come, let me show you." Sarah guided me down the hallway, and I noticed my house was completely different. In the guest room, which I used as an office and to store my things, there was a double bed set up and various men's and women's clothing scattered around. "This is my parents' room," announced Sarah casually. "And my room?" I asked, already sensing the answer. "Oh, since the children were afraid to sleep alone in the new house, we put their beds in your room and David and I are staying in the back room. It's easier for me to get up at night with the pregnancy, as it's closer to the bathroom." I walked to my room as if in a nightmare. There were 2 small beds, toys scattered, children's clothes in my wardrobe. My double bed had been disassembled and leaned against the wall. "And where exactly am I going to sleep?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "We thought you could stay on the living room sofa for now," said Sarah, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It's just temporary until we get organized." I stood there processing the situation. I had rushed back from Germany, cut short my dream trip to discover I was without a room in my own house. And worse, they talked as if I were the guest, not the homeowner. "Sarah, dear, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is my house. I live here." It was Edward who responded with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, Robert. But now we're all one big family. We have to adapt to each other, right? Make some sacrifices for the common good." At that moment, I began to realize that this situation wasn't temporary, as David had told me, and that maybe I hadn't been called back to help the family. Maybe I had been called back for something completely different. That first night, I tried to sleep on my own sofa, but it was impossible. Besides the discomfort, the house was full of strange noises. Edward snored loudly, Margaret got up several times to go to the bathroom, and the children woke up crying twice. When I finally managed to doze off, At 5 a.m., I was awakened by the sound of the television. It was Edward watching the news at maximum volume. "Good morning, Robert. Got up early today?" he said cheerfully, as if it were normal to turn on the television at 5 a.m. in a house that wasn't his. "Edward, it's 5 in the morning," I said, still trying to orient myself. "Oh, I have the habit of getting up early. On the farm, we wake up with the roosters. You can sleep more if you want." "I'll turn down the volume." But the damage was already done. I went to the kitchen to try to make coffee and encountered a surprise. My kitchen was completely reorganized. The spices I kept in one cupboard were in another. My pots had been replaced by others, and there was a new coffee maker I didn't recognize. "Did you like it?" It was Margaret appearing behind me. "I organized everything yesterday. Your kitchen was very disorganized, no pattern at all. Now it's easier to cook for many people." "You reorganized my kitchen? Of course, we're going to be here for a while, right? It has to work for everyone. By the way, I already bought everything to make breakfast. Today is Emma's birthday. There will be many people." "Wait," I said, confused. "But wasn't Emma's birthday next week?" "Oh, Sarah changed the plans," Margaret replied casually. "She thought it better to do it here at home today. She said it would save money, and since the house is big, it will fit everyone better. Change the plans. But nobody consulted me about having a party in my house." "Oh, Robert, you don't need to worry about anything. We already organized everything. Sarah even called all the guests, telling them about the change. It's going to be a beautiful party, and you won't even have work." I stood there, trying to process that they had decided to throw a birthday party in my house without asking me, and had even reorganized my kitchen for it. "How many people are coming?" "About 20, 30 at most. Just Sarah's family and some of Emma's little friends. We already organized everything, don't worry." When David came home from work at lunchtime, I called him to talk. "Son, I need to talk to you about this situation." "Talk, Dad." "What is it?" "David, when you called me in Germany, you said it was temporary. But from the way things are organized here, it seems like you've moved permanently." He sighed heavily. "Dad, the situation is complicated. We tried to rent another place, but with Sarah pregnant and everything, and her parents came to help. Son, but I don't have space for 5 adults and 2 children, and there's another baby coming." That's when Edward appeared, as if he had been waiting for the conversation. "Robert, may I give a suggestion? We need to think like a real family. We've practically been relatives for 6 years, right?" "What do you mean, Edward?" "Look, I'll be direct with you. Margaret and I aren't in a good financial situation. We had some problems with the property in the countryside, and David and Sarah are also tight. But if we unite, share expenses, it could work for everyone." I felt a tightness in my chest. "What kind of sharing?" "You have the house, which is the most expensive. We can help with food, electricity, water. And look at the benefits. There's always someone to take care of the house when you travel. The children grow up close to their grandfather. When the new baby is born, there's everyone to help." David was silent, looking at the floor. I realized this conversation had happened before without me. "And if I don't want this arrangement?" It was Margaret who answered, appearing in the kitchen with Emma by the hand. "Robert, think carefully. You're already 64 years old. Soon you'll need help too, and we're offering our help now, while you're still well." Her speech had a tone that gave me chills. It was polite but had a subtle threat behind it. "Besides," continued Edward, "the children have already gotten used to here. Look at Emma, poor thing. She was so happy that Grandpa arrived for her birthday." I looked at my granddaughter, who was looking at me with those big, innocent eyes. How could I say no to her? That afternoon, during Emma's party, I observed how they had taken control of my house. Margaret commanded the kitchen as if she were the owner. Edward received guests at the door as if he were the host, and both talked about the house as our house to visitors. When one of my neighbors, Mrs. Wilson, asked how the experience of living together was going, it was Edward who answered, "It's been great. Robert now has a big family to take care of him. He's not alone anymore." Mrs. Wilson looked at me with a strange expression, as if silently asking if I was okay with that. I forced a smile, but inside I felt like a stranger in my own house. Later, when I was helping to put away the party things, I overheard a conversation between Margaret and one of Sarah's friends. "Yes, we decided to move here permanently. The house is big, there's room for everyone. And Robert is loving having the family nearby." Permanently. The word echoed in my head like an alarm. That night I tried to talk to David again, but he was evasive. "Dad, let's see how things develop. For now it's working, right?" "David, this is my house. I wasn't consulted about any of this." "But Dad, you always said family is most important. And they are family now. My children are your grandchildren." That's when I realized they were using my love for my grandchildren as a form of pressure. How could I deny help to the children? How could I kick out a pregnant daughter-in-law? How could I leave my grandchildren without a place to live? But as the days passed, the situation became increasingly heavy. Edward had opinions about everything: what to watch on television, what kind of food to make, even how I should treat my own grandchildren. "Robert, you're spoiling the children too much," he said one day when I gave Emma a chocolate. "Sweets before dinner spoil the appetite." "Edward, I've always given sweets to my grandchildren. But now the rules are different. We need to have consistency in education. The rules are different." He said that as if I were a babysitter in my own house. Margaret also had her opinions. When I wanted to water my plants on the porch, she said, "Let me take care of that. You might forget and overwater." When I went to stir my own food that was on the stove, she said, "Don't stir it, Robert. I already seasoned it the way Edward likes." And worst of all, when the electricity and water bills arrived at the end of the month, the amount had tripled. When I commented on this, Edward said, "That's normal, right? Now there are more people, but don't worry, we'll help with half. Half of $360 electricity bill that was normally $120. They were helping to pay the excess they themselves had created. That's when I began to realize this wasn't temporary help. It was a planned invasion, and I was losing control of my own life. On a Friday, 2 weeks after I had returned from Germany, I was on the porch trying to have a moment of peace when my phone rang. It was Michael calling from Germany. Normally he called on weekends, so I found the timing strange. "Hi, son. Everything all right there?" "Dad, I need to talk to you urgently." "Are you alone?" His tone was serious, worried. "I am. What happened?" "Dad, I've been thinking about the situation at home and decided to do some research. Do you remember Sarah's parents' full names?" "Edward and Margaret. The surname, I think, is Richardson." "Why, son?" "Dad, I researched them here on the internet, on social media, and discovered some very strange things. Did you know they've lived in other relatives' houses before?" I felt a chill in my stomach. "What do you mean?" "I found old Facebook posts from Margaret. In 2019, she posted photos at her sister's house in Liverpool, talking about how they had moved there temporarily. But in the photos, the house was all reorganized. They had put their own furniture, seemed like owners of the house. And then I searched more. I found Margaret's sister's profile. In 2020, she made several posts complaining about relatives who abused hospitality, and that she had to take drastic measures to recover her own house. My heart raced. "Do you think that—" "Dad, wait, there's more. I also researched legal proceedings in their names. Edward has 2 actions for non-payment of rent, one in 2018 and another in 2020, and Margaret appears as a witness in an adverse possession process against her own sister-in-law. My God, son, I think they do this professionally. They install themselves in relatives' houses, take control, and then claim housing rights." I was trembling. "But Michael, David can't be knowing this." "Dad, I tried to call David yesterday, but Edward answered. He said David was busy and that I could talk to him about anything. Isn't that strange?" It was strange, yes. David always answered my calls and Michael's. "Son, are you sure about this information?" "Dad, I'm going to send everything to you via WhatsApp now." "But listen, I researched the company Edward said he had in the countryside. It doesn't exist. The address he gave Sarah is an empty lot." My head was spinning. So they lied about financial problems. "Dad, I think they're lying about everything. And there's one more thing that worries me a lot. What, son? I called a friend of mine who works at a registry office there in England. He explained that if a person lives in a property for more than 2 years, even without a contract, they can file for adverse possession, especially if they can prove they invested in improvements to the house. Improvements? Dad, didn't they change the lock, buy furniture, reorganize the entire house? This can be used as investment and improvements in a legal process. I froze. Everything started to make sense. The rush to change the lock, the complete reorganization of the house, the insistence on making improvements, the way they talked about the house as if it were theirs. Michael, but they can't do this. The house is mine. I have the deed. Dad, I know, but they can try. And while the process runs, which can take years, they stay living there. Have you seen cases like this in England? It was true. I remembered acquaintances who had gone through similar situations. Son, what do you think I should do? Dad, first you need to talk to David alone without them around. I think David doesn't know any of this and they're manipulating him too. How am I going to manage to talk to him alone? They don't leave him alone. Dad, you can ask him to take you to the pharmacy or pretend you need to go to the bank with him. Any excuse to get him out of the house. And if everything you discovered is true, then you'll have to act fast because the longer they stay there, the harder it will be to get them out. When I hung up the phone, I stood there on the porch, absorbing everything Michael had told me. In a few minutes, I received the evidence via WhatsApp. They were really photos from Facebook profiles, screenshots of legal proceedings, everything documented. In one of the photos, Margaret was in her sister's kitchen, posing as if she were the owner. The caption said, "Finally organized our new kitchen. Now it's a pleasure to cook." At the date of the post, they had been at the sister's house for only a month. In another photo, Edward was sitting in an armchair, feet up, watching television. The caption was, "After so much work, we deserve rest in our little corner." It was exactly the same behavior they were having in my house. At that moment, Edward entered the porch. "Robert, who are you talking to?" "My son, Michael." "Oh, good. How is he? And the little grandson?" "They're fine." I quickly put away my phone. "And him? What did he think of our organization here at home? He must be happy that you're not alone anymore." The way he said "our organization" and "our house" gave me chills. Now I knew it wasn't coincidence. "Edward, may I ask a question?" "Of course. Have you and Margaret lived with other relatives before?" I saw a flash of tension cross his face, but it was quick. "Oh yes, we lived with Margaret's sister for a while when we were having problems with the farm, but there were some conflicts. You know how family is?" "What kind of conflicts?" "Oh, nonsense, jealousy, envy. Her sister didn't like seeing us well, got jealous of the organization we did in her house, ended up kicking us out." His version was completely different from what Michael had discovered. According to Margaret's sister's posts, they had tried to take over the house, and she needed a lawyer to get them out. "And how did you find out about David's situation?" "What do you mean?" "You came for Emma's birthday precisely the week their contract expired. Was it coincidence?" Edward laughed, but a nervous laugh. "No, Robert. Sarah called us desperate, saying they were going to be homeless. We came running to help. But I remembered David saying the contract expired last week when he called me, and Sarah's parents had been there for more than a week when I arrived. That night, when everyone was sleeping, I stayed awake on the sofa, thinking about everything. For the first time since I had returned, I could see the situation clearly. It wasn't coincidence, it was all planned, and I had fallen right into their trap. The question now was, did David know, or was he also being manipulated? I needed to find out urgently, because if Michael was right, every day that passed was working against me. On Saturday morning, I pretended I had a headache and stayed lying on the sofa while everyone went out shopping. It was the first time in weeks I was alone in my own house. I took the opportunity to call Michael. "Son, I need your help to investigate more. Yesterday I talked to Edward and the versions don't match." "Dad, I was already researching more things. I got their national insurance numbers through a consultation site. The situation is worse than we imagined." "What did you discover?" Dad, Edward's credit is ruined for 3 years. He owes more than $50,000 in credit cards and loans. And the farm they said they had was sold at auction by the bank in 2021. My blood froze. They're completely bankrupt. And there's more. I found an employment lawsuit against them. They hired a domestic worker last year and didn't pay her rights. The woman went to court. My God. So they have no money at all. Nothing, Dad. And worse, I discovered Sarah doesn't know any of this. I found some Instagram posts where she commented with friends about her prosperous parents who have a beautiful farm in the countryside. So they lied to their own daughter. Exactly, and now I understand their plan. They convinced Sarah not to renew the lease knowing you would take in the family. Then they appeared with the birthday excuse and settled in together. But Michael, how did they know I was going to travel precisely at this time? Dad, don't you remember? Sarah posted on social media that her father-in-law was going to travel to Germany. I saw the post. She even marked the dates. Everything was starting to make sense. They had planned everything down to the smallest details. Son, what do I do now? Dad, first let's collect more evidence. Can you photograph their documents? Anything that's scattered around the house? I can try. And Dad, there's something important. You need to record conversations. If they confirm they intend to stay permanently, this serves as evidence. How do I record without them noticing? On your phone, there's a recording app, or just leave WhatsApp recording audio. Anything works. That weekend, I became a detective in my own house. When they went out, I photographed documents they left scattered. When they talked among themselves, I discreetly activated the phone recorder. That's how I discovered a shocking conversation between Edward and Margaret on Sunday night. They were on the porch and thought I was sleeping. Margaret, do you think Robert is suspecting something? I don't know, Edward. He's been a bit strange these days, quieter. We need to speed up the process. Next week, I'm going to bring some of our furniture that's in storage. The more of our stuff here, the better. And if he complains? He won't complain. Can you see how he is? Poor thing, an old man alone, without structure to fight. And David is on our side. Are you sure David won't create problems? I am. He's desperate, without money, with pregnant wife. He needs us as much as we need this place. And if we manage to stay here about 2 years, that's it, right? Exactly. 2 years and the house becomes ours by right. Robert doesn't understand anything about law. I was recording everything on my phone, my heart beating so hard I was afraid they would hear. There was the complete confession of their plan. On Monday, I called Michael and sent all the recordings via WhatsApp. Dad, this is pure gold. They confessed everything. Now you have to act fast. What do you suggest? First, find a lawyer. Take all this evidence. Second, you need to talk to David urgently, away from them. How am I going to manage to get David out of the house? Invent an emergency. Say you need to go to the bank to solve an urgent problem and only trust him to accompany you. On Tuesday, I put the plan into action. David's son, can you come with me to the bank? I have a problem with my account and don't understand anything about these internet things. Of course, Dad. Let's go now. Let's go. On the way to the bank, I took a deep breath and began. David, I need to talk seriously with you. Talk, Dad. Son, do you really think the situation at home is normal? He was silent for a while. Why, Dad? Did something happen? David, since when do your in-laws make decisions in my house? Since when do they reorganize my kitchen? Choose what to watch on television? Decide the rules of my house? Dad, they're trying to help. Son, answer me something. Did you know your in-laws are bankrupt? That they lost the farm at auction? That they owe $50,000? David stepped on the brake and stopped the car on the shoulder. What do you mean, Dad? Your brother researched, David. They lied about everything. The farm, the financial situation, everything. I showed him on my phone all the evidence Michael had sent. I watched my son's face turn pale as he read. Dad, I didn't know any of this. They said they had a temporary situation and would soon return to the farm. David, they're not returning to any farm. They want to stay in my house permanently, and if they stay 2 years, they can file for adverse possession. Dad, That's not possible. That's when I played the recording of their conversation on the porch. David listened to everything in silence, and I saw tears forming in his eyes. Dad, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Son, they used you. Used Sarah's pregnancy situation. Used the children, used everything. But Dad, what do we do now? Sarah won't believe it. She loves her parents. David, we're going to have to act united. You, me, and Michael. Because if we don't act, I'm going to lose my house. What do you mean lose the house, Dad? Son, they already changed the lock, already put their own furniture, already established themselves as owners. Every day that passes makes it harder to get them out. David was silent for a long time, processing everything. Dad, what do you want me to do? First, help me find a good lawyer. Second, we're going to have to talk to Sarah and explain the situation. And third, we're going to have to make a decision. Either they leave willingly or it will have to be by force. And if Sarah doesn't accept? David, son, Sarah is your wife, but that's my house and I'm not going to give up my house for anyone. For the first time since I had returned from Germany, I saw determination in David's eyes. Dad, I support you. We're going to solve this. That afternoon, we went straight to the office of a lawyer Mrs. Wilson had recommended, Mr. Clark, specialist in property law. He listened to the whole story, analyzed the evidence, and was direct. Mr. Thompson, you're in a delicate situation, but there's still time to solve it. They haven't completed enough time for adverse possession yet, but every day counts. What do you suggest? Immediate extrajudicial notification for them to vacate the property. If they don't leave voluntarily, repossession action. With this evidence you have, the case is won immediately. And how long does it take? If they don't contest, 2 weeks. If they contest, it could take a few months. But with these recordings, confessing their plan, a judge will hardly rule in their favor. We left the office with a clear plan. Mr. Clark would prepare the notification to deliver on Thursday. David, I said on the way back, now comes the hardest part, talking to Sarah. Dad, let me talk to her, but it's going to be difficult. She idolizes her parents. Son, she's going to have to choose. Either she stays on the side of truth or stays on the side of those who lied to her all their lives. When we got home, everything seemed normal. Edward was watching television. Margaret was cooking, the children playing. But now I knew the truth, and the truth was going to come out very soon. The game had turned. Now it was my turn to deal the cards. On Tuesday night, I received a call from Michael that completely changed our plans. Dad, I got a last-minute ticket. I arrived Thursday morning. What do you mean, son? You hadn't said you were only coming at the end of the year? Dad, the situation is too serious. I'm not going to let you face this alone. Besides, my presence will catch them by surprise. They won't have time to invent more lies. But son, the ticket must have cost a fortune. Dad, there's no price that pays for your peace of mind. And Katrin agreed. She said family protects itself. On Thursday morning at 10 o'clock, a van stopped in front of the house. I was at the window waiting, and when I saw Michael getting out with 2 large suitcases, my heart raced with emotion and relief. Edward, who was having coffee on the porch, almost choked when he saw Michael walking toward the house. Margaret, come here quick. Robert's son arrived. I opened the door before Michael even knocked. My son. We hugged there at the entrance, and I felt I was no longer alone in that battle. Surprise! Michael entered carrying the suitcases, and soon the children ran to hug the uncle they barely knew personally. Edward and Margaret appeared in the living room with expressions of pure discomfort. They clearly weren't expecting this visit. Michael, what a surprise, said Margaret, forcing a smile. Nobody said you were coming. It was all very last minute, replied Michael, looking at me knowingly. When I heard about the situation here at home, I didn't think twice. What situation? Asked Edward, and I noticed the nervousness in his voice. Well, the situation of you living here, right? My father told me everything. David came home from work at lunchtime and was emotional to see his brother. They hugged tightly, and I saw David was relieved to have support. During lunch, Michael was subtly collecting information. So, Edward, how is the situation with your farm going? Oh, it's being resolved, Edward stammered. Good. It must be difficult to manage rural property from a distance. How many hectares do you have exactly? Edward looked at Margaret, clearly uncomfortable. About 15 hectares. Wow, and what kind of livestock do you have there? Cattle? Crops? Edward's answers became increasingly vague and contradictory. Michael was doing what he does best, collecting information through apparently innocent questions. After lunch, Michael, David, and I met in the backyard, away from Edward and Margaret's ears. Dad filled me in on all the evidence, said Michael. Now we need to decide how we're going to act. I already talked to Sarah last night, said David. I showed her the evidence. She was in shock. First she didn't want to believe it, then she cried all night. And what was her decision? She said she's going to confront her parents this afternoon. She wants to hear it from their mouths. David, said Michael, you have to be prepared. They're going to deny everything. They'll invent excuses. They'll try to blame other people. I know, Michael, but Sarah needs to hear it. She has to make a decision. At 4 p.m., Sarah arrived from the doctor. She was visibly tense, with swollen eyes from crying so much. She called her parents to talk in their room. The three of us stayed in the living room, but we could hear the raised voices. First was Sarah's voice asking about the farm, then Edward's voice giving confused explanations, then Margaret's voice louder asking who had put ideas in their daughter's head. Suddenly we heard Sarah shouting, "You lied to me, lied about everything." Edward came out of the room like a rocket and came straight to the living room, pointing his finger at Michael. "It was you, wasn't it? You came here to plant discord in the family." "Calm down, Edward," said Michael, remaining serene. "Nobody planted discord. We just showed the truth." "What truth?" "You invented a bunch of lies to harm us." That's when I stood up and said with a firm voice, "Edward, enough lies. We know everything." I took my phone and played the recording of his conversation with Margaret on the porch. When it got to the part where he talked about staying 2 years to get the house by adverse possession, his face turned red. That was taken out of context. We weren't being serious. "Edward," said Michael, "do you want me to read here the legal proceedings in your name? The $50,000 you owe? The farm auction?" Edward fell silent. Margaret appeared in the living room crying, holding Sarah by the arm. "Sarah, daughter, are you going to believe these strangers instead of your own parents?" Sarah pulled away from her mother's arm. "Mom, you lied to me. You said you had a prosperous farm, that you were having temporary problems. I discovered you lost everything 3 years ago and didn't tell me. Daughter, we didn't want to worry you. You didn't want to worry me, or you wanted to use me to get a place to live." That's when David positioned himself beside his wife. "Edward, Margaret, you lied to all of us. You used my family. You used my father." "David," said Edward, trying one last card, "are you going to kick us out? Your wife is 7 months pregnant. Are you going to put us on the street?" "You put yourselves in this situation," replied David. "Nobody asked you to lie." Michael went to the table and took an envelope from his folder. "Edward, Margaret, this is an extrajudicial notification. You have 48 hours to vacate this house voluntarily." "What right do you have to?" "The right of ownership," I interrupted. "This house is mine. I have the deed, I pay the bills, and I didn't give permission for you to live here indefinitely." Margaret started crying louder. "Robert, how can you do this? We're family." "Family doesn't lie, doesn't manipulate, doesn't invade," I replied. "Family respects." Edward tried one last strategy. "And the grandchildren? Are you going to separate the children from their grandparents?" It was Sarah who answered. "Dad, stop. You lied to me for 3 years, made me believe you had financial stability, that I could count on you. I discovered you're bankrupt and wanted to use my family to solve your problems." "Sarah, no. Mum, it's over. I'm not going to be deceived anymore. You created this situation. You solve it." Edward looked at all of us and realized he had lost the battle. "Fine, but you'll regret this. You're destroying a family." "Edward," said Michael, The family was already destroyed the moment you decided to lie and manipulate. That night, while they packed in silence, Michael, David, Sarah, and I met on the porch. "Father-in-law," said Sarah, "I apologize. I didn't know anything. If I had known they were planning this..." "Daughter, you were also their victim. They lied to you as much as they lied to us." "But now you don't have anywhere to live," I said. "What about your apartment?" "Dad," interrupted David, "we'll manage. We'll rent another apartment even if it's smaller. The important thing is that it's ours, with our family, without lies." Michael put his hand on my shoulder. "Dad, you did what you had to do. Defend what's yours. Defend your dignity." On Friday morning, Edward and Margaret left the house with their suitcases without saying goodbye. They had gotten a room in a cheap boarding house downtown. When the door closed behind them, I felt enormous relief. My house was my house again. But the best part was when David told me, "Dad, thank you for teaching me the difference between real family and people who just use the family name to get what they want." The great turnaround had happened, and for the first time in weeks I was going to sleep in my own bed. Michael stayed another week in England helping to reorganize the whole family situation. It was a period of healing and reconstruction I'll never forget. On Saturday morning, after Edward and Margaret left, the four of us, Michael, David, Sarah, and I, sat at the kitchen table for a frank conversation. It was the first time in weeks I truly felt at home. "First," said Michael, "let's solve the practical situation. David, you need a place to live." "We're already looking," replied David. "We found some smaller apartments, but within our budget." "It doesn't need to be anything fancy," said Sarah, rubbing her belly. "The important thing is that it's our home, without lies, without manipulation." I looked at my daughter-in-law and saw a different woman from the one who had arrived there a few days ago. The shock of discovering her parents' lies had transformed her. She was more mature, more aware. "Sarah," I said, "you don't need to feel guilty. You were deceived as much as we were." "Father-in-law, I feel terrible. My parents used you, used your kindness, your house." "Daughter, the ones who should feel terrible are them. You're as much a victim as I am." Michael intervened. "But now we need to establish healthy boundaries so this never happens again." During that conversation, we established some important rules. First, any family emergency situation would be discussed with everyone before any decision. Second, my house would continue being my house, but there would always be space for my children and grandchildren in real situations of need. Third, total transparency. No half-truths or omissions. "Dad," said David, "I want to apologize. I should have realized what was happening. I should have defended you from the first day." "Son, you were in a difficult situation. Pregnant wife, no house, no money. They took advantage of your vulnerability. But that doesn't justify it. I've known you for 34 years. I know what kind of person you are. I should have trusted more." Michael put his hand on his brother's shoulder. "David, the important thing is that you learned, and in the end you did the right thing." That weekend we began reorganizing the house. I returned to my room. Sarah and David arranged the guest room for the children. The kitchen was reorganized the way I liked it, and the feeling of peace gradually returned. But the most important conversation happened on Sunday night, when Michael called me to walk down the street. "Dad, I want to talk about what we learned from all this." "What did you learn, son?" "That you're much stronger than I imagined. When I was a child, I saw you always giving in, always trying to please everyone. I thought you didn't know how to assert yourself. And now I know you have a giant heart, but also a steel backbone when needed." We stopped under a tree I've known since I moved to this street 16 years ago. "Michael, son, I learned a very important lesson. Kindness isn't synonymous with weakness. I can be a loving father, a dedicated grandfather, and still defend what's mine. And I learned that real family is those who respect your boundaries, not those who try to cross them." On Monday, David came with good news. They had gotten a 2-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from my house. It wasn't big, but it was enough for them to start over. "Dad, we're moving on Saturday, but this time we'll do everything differently." "How so?" "First, we'll organize ourselves financially so we don't depend on anyone. Second, we'll establish our family routine without external interference. And third, we'll visit you every weekend but respecting everyone's schedules and limits. Sarah completed, and when the baby is born, if you want to help, you'll be very welcome at our house, at agreed times, without invasion, without imposition. This made me very happy. They had understood the difference between family help and toxic dependence. On Friday, the day before their move, we received an unexpected visit. It was Margaret's sister, the one who lived in Liverpool. "Sorry to bother you," she said at the door. "I heard my sister and brother-in-law were here. I came to warn you about their history." "Please come in," I said. "Actually, we already discovered everything." "Good, because they did the same thing to me 3 years ago. They settled in my house with excuses, started taking over everything, and then tried to go to court saying they had the right to stay." "And how did you solve it?" "Lawyer, notification, eviction. It cost money, but it was worth every penny. Now they're in a boarding house in Manchester, downtown, trying to apply the scam to other relatives." "Scam?" "They do this professionally. They've already done it with 3 different families. Always the same story. Temporary financial problems. Then they settle in. Then they claim possession rights. That confirmed everything we already knew. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't desperation. It was a calculated plan. On Saturday, I helped David and Sarah move to their new apartment. It was small, but it was clean, organized, and most importantly, it was theirs. "Thank you for everything, Dad," said David, giving me a tight hug. "Thank you for what, son?" "For teaching me that being a good person doesn't mean accepting anything, that I had the duty to protect you, not to stay silent." When I returned home that night, the feeling was indescribable. My house was silent, tidy, smelling like it always smelled. It was my house again. Michael left on Friday, but before going to the airport, he gave me a present. A new door alarm and an intercom. "Dad, now when someone wants to enter, you talk through the intercom first. Don't open the door for anyone without knowing exactly who they are and what they want." "Son, I don't need all this." "Yes, you do, Dad. You have a very good heart, and there are people in the world who take advantage of that." At the airport, at goodbye, he told me something I'll carry for the rest of my life. "Dad, I'm very proud of you. You faced a difficult situation and didn't let yourself be intimidated. You managed to protect what's yours and still keep our family united. Today, 3 months after all this, my life has found perfect balance. David, Sarah, and the children visit me every Sunday for lunch. The baby was born a month ago, a beautiful girl named Elizabeth in my honor, and I help take care of her 2 afternoons a week, but always at their house, or at my house at agreed times. Nobody has settled here without invitation anymore. The relationship with my children is stronger than ever. We learned that love isn't accepting everything. It's knowing how to say no when necessary. That true family is those who respect your boundaries, not those who try to cross them. And about Edward and Margaret, we learned they tried the same scam with Margaret's cousin in Nottingham, but he had already been warned by us and didn't accept. Today they're living in a studio apartment, without having managed to deceive anyone else. If I could give advice to other people going through similar situations, it would be this: kindness isn't weakness, but kindness without limits becomes vulnerability. True family wants your well-being, not your possessions. And mainly, it's never too late to regain control of your own life. I was 64 years old when I had to face this situation, and I succeeded. Age isn't an excuse to accept disrespect. Today, when I lie in my bed, in my house, surrounded by my objects, breathing the smell that was always mine, I know I made the right choices. Because in the end, the greatest inheritance we can leave our children isn't a house or money. It's the example that we should always defend our dignity, no matter who tries to take it from us, even when that person is part of our family. If this story touched your heart, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, comment below what city you're from, and answer me, what would you do in my place? Your message might brighten someone's day.